Maya's hand didn't shake when she placed the leather check presenter on the table, though she'd been on her feet for 11 hours straight. The fluorescent kitchen lights had burned after images into her vision, and her lower back sent sharp reminders with every step, but her face remained composed, practiced in the kind of blankness that good servers learn to wear like a second skin. Finally, the man in the grey suit said without looking up from his phone, "Took you long enough? Table 12, 6 people, 3 bottles of wine at $85 each, appetizers, entrees, desserts. The bill came to $1,847. Maya had calculated it twice, the way she always did, because mistakes at the Cardinal cost servers their shifts, and she couldn't afford to lose even one. The restaurant occupied the ground floor of a converted tobacco warehouse in Durham, North Carolina. All exposed brick and Edison bulbs, the kind of place that charged $32 for 12 ounces of steak and called it accessible fine dining. Maya had worked there for 7 months, ever since she'd moved back from Boston, ever since everything had fallen apart. The man in the grey suit finally looked at the bill. He was in his mid-50s, with the kind of tan that came from resort vacations and the kind of watch that cost more than Maya made in 6 months. His companions, 2 younger men in similarly expensive suits, 2 women with jewelry that caught the light like small warnings, had grown quieter as the evening progressed, their laughter becoming more measured, more careful. "Explain this to me," the man said, pushing the check presenter back toward Maya without opening it. His voice carried across the half-empty dining room. It was 10:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Most tables had cleared. "Explain exactly how you arrived at this number." Maya's manager, Derek, glanced over from the host stand. She could feel his attention like a spotlight. "Of course, sir," she said, her voice level. "You had 3 bottles of the 2019 Chateau. I know what we ordered." He leaned back in his chair, and something in his posture changed. His companions shifted too, an audience arranging itself. "I want you to explain the math. Show me how you calculated this bill. And if you can do it, really do it. Not just read numbers off a screen. I'll leave you a tip worth remembering." The woman to his left, blonde and sharp-featured, touched his arm. "Richard, come on." "No, I'm serious." Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "These kids today, they can't make change without a computer, can you?" He looked at Maya directly now. "Can you actually do math, or do you just carry plates and smile?" Maya felt something cold settle in her chest. Not anger, not yet, but a familiar recognition. She'd seen this before. This was a game, and she was the entertainment. "I can explain the bill, sir." "Without looking at it," Richard said. "Without your little tablet, without asking the kitchen, without any help. Right here, right now. Prove you actually know what you're doing." The restaurant had gone quiet. She could hear the ambient jazz playing through the speakers, the distant clatter of dishes being washed. She could feel other diners watching, other servers pausing mid-stride. Derek was walking toward the table now, his manager smile in place, ready to smooth things over, to apologize, to comp something. Maya spoke before he could arrive. "The 3 bottles of Chateau Margaux 2019 at $85 each is $255, she said. "You ordered 2 appetizer specials, the scallops and the octopus, at $24 each. That's $48. 4 people had the ribeye at $30. 2 had the halibut at $38. That's $128 plus $76, totaling $204 for entrees. 3 people ordered dessert, 2 chocolate terrines and 1 panna cotta, $14 each. That's $42. The woman at the end had a glass of the Sancerre, $18. You had 2 orders of truffle fries, $16 each, $32 total, plus automatic gratuity for parties of 6 or more, which is 20% of the subtotal." She paused, let the silence hold for a beat. "The subtotal before tax is $599. 20% of that is $119. $80 for gratuity. North Carolina sales tax on prepared food is 7. 5%. Applied to the subtotal of $590.99, which equals $44.93. Adding the base, the gratuity, and the tax. $599 plus $119. 80 plus 44. 93 equals 763. 73. Richard's smile had frozen. But you didn't order one round, Maya continued, her voice still calm, still professional. You ordered 3 rounds of drinks. I gave you the first round's total. Would you like me to continue? One of the younger men let out a breath that might have been a laugh. The blonde woman was staring at Maya with something between surprise and reassessment. The second round, Maya said, was 2 martinis at $16, 1 Manhattan at 18s, 1 glass of the Pinot Noir at 22s, 1 whiskey neat at $24, and 1 club soda with lime, no charge. That's $80 in drinks. Third round was similar, but you switched the Pinot for a glass of the Barolo at $28, so that round was $86. Added to the first round subtotal of $599, your complete meal subtotal is $765. The gratuity is calculated on that full amount. 765 times 0, 20 equals 153. Tax on 765 is at 7. 5% is 57, 38. Your total is 975, 38. She stopped. The number she'd said and the number on the check didn't match. Except, Maya added quietly, it's not. Derek had reached the table. Is everything all right here? Maya looked at Richard. You're right that the bill should be explained. The check says 1847. See? Richard spread his hands. She can't even... Because someone at this table ordered a bottle of Penfolds Grange, Maya said. It's $850. I didn't serve it. I don't know who ordered it. But it's on your bill. If you didn't order it, we need to remove it. If you did, then the math is $765 base plus $850 for the Penfolds equals $1, $615 subtotal. Gratuity is $323. Tax is $121. 13s. Total is $2,059. 13. She let that sit in the air. But your check says $1,847, which means someone in the kitchen made a mistake. The Penfolds was added, but the gratuity wasn't recalculated. You're actually being undercharged by 212 13s. The table was silent. Derek took the check presenter, opened it, and went pale. He excused himself. Richard stared at Maya. His companions stared at Maya. The woman with the blonde hair had a small smile now, something private and knowing. MIT, the woman said quietly. Full ride, wasn't it? Maya met her eyes. The woman was younger than she'd first appeared, maybe late 30s, with the kind of direct gaze that suggested she was used to being the smartest person in the room. How did you... Maya started. I know that kind of math, the woman said. That's not server training, that's real education. She glanced at Richard. And you just tried to humiliate someone who could probably calculate the compound interest on your portfolio faster than you could blink. Richard's face had gone red. Derek returned with the corrected check and apologies. The Penfolds had been ordered by the younger man on the left, who now looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. The new total was exactly what Maya had calculated. 2059s. 13. Richard paid with a black American Express card. He didn't say another word. When Derek brought back the receipt, Richard signed it and stood to leave. The tip line was blank. His companions filed out after him until only the blonde woman remained. She reached into her purse and pulled out her own card. What's the 20% on the Penfolds alone? She asked Maya. $170. The woman wrote something on the back of her business card and placed it on the table with $200 bills. The cash is yours. The number on the card is my direct line. My name is Catherine Chen. I'm a partner at Chen & Associates. We're a quantitative hedge fund in Charlotte. We're always looking for people who can actually think. She paused. Especially people who can stay calm under pressure and do differential calculus in their head while being publicly mocked. I didn't do calculus, Maya said quietly. No, Catherine agreed, but you could if you needed to, couldn't you? Maya didn't answer. Catherine stood. Look at the card when you get home. Think about whether you want to keep explaining checks to people who'll never respect you, or whether you want to use that brain for something that matters. She glanced toward the door where Richard had vanished. I've worked with men like him for 20 years. They think money makes them smart. It doesn't. But smart, real smart, that's worth something. Then she was gone, leaving Maya standing beside table 12 with $200 in cash and a business card that felt impossibly heavy. Derek approached, his expression unreadable. That was impressive, he said. But maybe next time, just get me if there's a problem. Of course, Maya said. She cleared the table mechanically, her hands moving through familiar motions while her mind spun in tight circles. She hadn't thought about MIT in 8 months, hadn't let herself think about the thesis she'd never finished, the scholarship she'd walked away from, the advisor who'd stopped returning her emails after she'd left Boston in the middle of the spring semester. The business card was cream-colored, expensive stock. Catherine Chen, PhD, partner. Below it, a phone number and an email address, and on the back, in neat handwriting, real talent doesn't belong in the service industry. Call me. Maya slipped it into her apron pocket and carried the dirty dishes to the kitchen, where the night crew was already breaking down the line. Her shift ended at midnight. She had another at her second job, morning coffee shift at Grounds and Petals, starting at 6 a.m. She didn't think about the card again until she was walking to her car in the parking lot, the August humidity pressing against her skin like a warm, damp hand. She lived in a studio apartment on the east side of Durham, where the rent was $675 a month and the neighbors played music until 3 a.m. on weekends. She drove a 2007 Toyota Corolla with 186,000 miles that her father had given her before he died. Her phone buzzed. A text from her younger sister, Lena. Called Mum. She's worse. Asked about you 3 times. Didn't remember you'd visited Sunday. Maya sat in her car and watched the text until the screen went dark. Then she pulled out Catherine Chen's card and stared at it until her vision blurred. The problem with being smart, she'd learned, was that you could see all the variables clearly. You could calculate the odds, you could run the numbers on every possible future and see exactly where each path led. And sometimes, when you did the math, every answer came up wrong. Maya's alarm went off at 5:17 a.m., which gave her 43 minutes to shower, dress, drive across town, and start brewing the first pot of dark roast at Grounds and Petals. She'd learned to function on 5 hours of sleep, though her body had stopped pretending it was sustainable. There was a constant low-grade ache in her temples, a tremor in her hands when she held them still that disappeared only when she was moving. The coffee shop occupied a narrow storefront on 9th Street, wedged between a yoga studio and a vintage clothing store, catering to Duke students and the kind of early-morning professionals who'd colonized Durham's downtown in waves over the past decade. Maya had the opening shift Tuesday through Friday, which meant she worked alone until 7, when Jessie arrived to handle the morning rush. She liked the solitude of those first hours, the ritual of grinding beans, steaming milk, arranging pastries in the case that arrived pre-dawn from a bakery in Raleigh. She liked the mathematics of it, the precise ratios of water to coffee, the temperature calibrations, the way a good espresso required understanding pressure and time and extraction rates. It wasn't MIT-level mathematics, but it was enough to keep part of her brain engaged. Catherine Chen's business card sat in her wallet, where she'd placed it after the shift at the Cardinal. She hadn't looked at it since getting home at 12:47 a.m., hadn't let herself think about it while she'd eaten leftover rice and fallen into bed. But now, in the quiet of the coffee shop, with only the espresso machine's hiss for company, she thought about it constantly. The bell above the door chimed at 6:52 a.m. Maya looked up from the pour-over she was preparing and felt her stomach drop. Her mother stood in the doorway, wearing a floral dress that Maya recognized from 5 years ago and bedroom slippers that she definitely shouldn't be wearing outside. Her grey hair was uncombed, and there was a wildness in her eyes that Maya knew too well. "Mom," Maya said carefully, setting down the kettle, "what are you doing here?" "You weren't home," her mother said. Her voice had that particular quality it got during episodes, too loud and too bright. "I went to your apartment, but you weren't there. Where were you?" "I was sleeping, Mum. It's early." "How did you get here?" "I drove." She said it defensively, like Maya had accused her of something. Maya's hands went cold. Her mother hadn't driven in 6 months, not since the neurologist had explained that early-onset Alzheimer's affected spatial reasoning and reaction time, not since Maya had hidden the car keys and sold the Buick to pay for medication that insurance wouldn't cover. "Whose car did you drive?" "Mine, my blue car. It was in the driveway." "There was no blue car. There hadn't been for half a year." Maya pulled out her phone and called Lena, who answered on the second ring, her voice thick with sleep. "She's here," Maya said. "At the coffee shop. She says she drove." "Shit. Okay, shit." Rustling sounds, Lena getting out of bed. "I'm coming. 20 minutes. Can you keep her there?" "Yeah." Maya hung up and came around the counter. Her mother was looking around the coffee shop like she'd never seen it before, touching the backs of chairs, running her fingers along the exposed brick wall. "This is pretty," her mother said. "Is this your store?" "I work here, Mum. Remember, I've been working here since March." Her mother smiled, but it was a vague smile, untethered. "You're so smart. You should own a store. You could own anything you wanted. You were always the smart one." The bell chimed again. A regular. Mark, a Duke medical resident who ordered the same Americano every morning, stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. "Hey, Maya," he said carefully. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, just family visit. Can you give me 5 minutes?" "Take your time." But he didn't leave. Just moved to a corner table and pretended to look at his phone. Maya guided her mother to a chair and brought her a cup of chamomile tea. Her mother held it without drinking, watching the steam rise like it was the most fascinating thing she'd ever seen. "Do you know what day it is?" Maya asked quietly. Her mother looked at her, and for a moment something sharp and aware flickered in her eyes. A glimpse of the woman who'd taught high school mathematics for 30 years, who'd helped Maya with calculus homework at the kitchen table, who'd known exactly how brilliant her daughter was and had pushed her to reach for MIT when Maya had thought it was impossible. "Tuesday," her mother said. Then the sharpness faded. "Or Thursday?" "No, it's morning. That's what matters. Morning is when you're supposed to get up." Lena arrived 17 minutes later, still in sweatpants, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun. She was 23, 4 years younger than Maya, working 2 jobs of her own while taking night classes at Durham Tech. She looked exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with being woken up early. "Hey, Mom," Lena said, crouching beside their mother's chair. "Let's go home, okay? I'll make you breakfast." "But I just got here. I'm having tea with Maya." "You can have tea at home. We have tea at home." It took 15 more minutes of gentle coaxing before their mother agreed to leave. Maya walked them to Lena's car, a decade-old Honda Civic with a cracked bumper, and watched as Lena buckled their mother into the passenger seat. "She took a neighbor's car," Lena said quietly, coming around to the driver's side. "Mr. Harrison's. He leaves his keys in the ignition because he's 87 and doesn't give a shit. I found her car in his driveway. Jesus." "We can't do this anymore, Maya." Lena's voice was flat, exhausted. "She needs full-time care. We need to start looking at facilities." "We can't afford facilities. We can't afford not to. What if she'd gotten on the highway? What if she'd hurt someone?" Maya had no answer for that. The math was simple and brutal. Their mother's social security and pension covered about 60% of what a decent memory care facility cost. The deficit was $2,800 a month, give or take. Maya and Lena together pulled in enough to cover it, barely, if they stopped eating and never slept and worked every possible hour, which they were already doing. "I'll figure something out," Maya said. "You always say that." Lena wasn't angry, just tired. "But there's nothing to figure out. The math doesn't work. It's never going to work." She drove away, leaving Maya standing in the parking lot as the August sun climbed higher, promising another day of punishing heat. Jessie arrived at 7, and the morning rush started, students ordering complicated lattes, professionals grabbing coffee and bagels, the steady stream of transactions that kept Maya's hands busy and her mind carefully blank. She didn't think about Catherine Chen's card. She didn't think about the MIT fellowship she'd abandoned. She didn't think about the thesis on machine learning applications in financial modeling that she'd been 3 months from defending. She didn't think about any of it until her phone buzzed at 11:23 a.m. with a text from an unknown number. "This is Catherine Chen. I hope it's not too forward to text you. I got your number from Derek at the Cardinal. I called and said I had a job offer for you, which I do. Can we talk?" Maya stared at the message until Jessie called her name, asking where the backup oat milk was stored. She didn't respond to the text. At 2:37 p.m. another message arrived. "I know you're probably thinking this is too good to be true, or wondering what the catch is. There's no catch. I recognize talent when I see it, and I hate seeing it wasted. 5-minute phone call, that's all I'm asking. You can decide after." Maya's shift ended at 3. She cleaned the espresso machine, restocked the pastry case, and counted out the register. Jessie was chattering about a date she had that weekend, about the guy from her sociology class who'd finally asked for her number, about how she thought she might actually like him. Maya made appropriate noises at appropriate moments, the social mathematics of friendship that she'd learned to perform even when her mind was elsewhere. At 3:15, standing in the parking lot beside her Corolla, Maya pulled out her phone and stared at Catherine's messages. Then she pulled up her bank account, checking $347, $83 savings, $1, $205, 19. Her mother's medication cost $890 a month. Rent was due in 4 days. Her car insurance was due in 9. She had a shift at the Cardinal tonight, 5 to close, which meant she'd make maybe $140 if it was a good night, less if it wasn't. She did the math. She always did the math. The numbers never changed. She called Catherine Chen. "Maya," Catherine answered on the first ring, sounding pleased. "Thank you for calling." 5 minutes, Maya said. "Fair enough. Here's the pitch. I run a small quant fund. We use algorithmic models to predict market movements and execute trades. It's highly mathematical, highly competitive, and most of the people who do it well have PhDs from places like MIT in mathematics, computer science, or financial engineering, which you were on track to get before you left." "How do you—" "I made some calls," Catherine said simply. "Your advisor, Professor Morrison, says you were the most talented student he'd worked with in 15 years. Said your thesis on using neural networks to predict high-frequency trading patterns was groundbreaking. Also said you disappeared in April without explanation, and he hasn't heard from you since." Maya closed her eyes. "I had family circumstances. I assumed. Here's what I'm offering. Junior analyst position. Base salary 85,000 plus quarterly bonuses based on performance. You'd be working with our data team, building models, testing algorithms. It's demanding work. Long hours, steep learning curve, but it's also the kind of work that someone with your brain should be doing instead of explaining bills to drunk billionaires." $85,000. Maya's mind automatically converted it. $7,080 per month. Minus taxes, probably $5,200 take home. Enough to cover her mother's care, rent, all the bills, with money left over. Enough to breathe. "Why me?" Maya asked. "You don't know me. You saw me do basic arithmetic." I saw you do complex multivariable calculations in your head while under social pressure from a bully with a business degree. I saw you stay calm, stay accurate, and correct an error that could have cost your restaurant money. That's not basic arithmetic. That's applied mathematics under stress, which is exactly what this job is. I don't have my degree. Yet, part of the offer is that we'd sponsor you to finish remotely. You're what, 3 months from defending? I was. So finish. Take the job, prove yourself for 6 months, and we'll work with MIT to get you back on track for your thesis defense. Morrison already said he'd be willing if you came back with a good reason. It sounded impossible. It sounded like a trap. I need to think about it, Maya said. Of course, but think quickly. I'm looking to fill the position by the 1st of September, which gives you about 4 days. Catherine paused. I know it seems sudden. I know you don't know me, but I remember what it's like to be brilliant and broke and watching your life contract around you. I was you, 12 years ago, different circumstances, same feeling. Someone gave me a chance. I'm giving you one. I'll call you tomorrow. That's all I ask. Maya hung up and sat in her car with the engine off, letting the heat build until sweat ran down her spine. She pulled Catherine's business card from her wallet and stared at it, then pulled up MIT's website on her phone and navigated to her advisor's page. Professor Alan Morrison. His photo showed a man in his 60s with wild grey hair and kind eyes. She'd liked him. He'd believed in her work. She'd sent him an email when she'd left Boston. Family emergency. Need to take a leave of absence. I'm sorry. He'd responded, take the time you need. Your work will be here when you're ready. She'd never been ready. 8 months had passed and she'd never been ready. Maya started the car and drove to her apartment, where she had 3 hours before her next shift. She made rice and eggs and ate while reading through old emails from MIT. Old messages from classmates who'd wondered where she'd gone, old syllabi from classes she'd never finished. Her phone buzzed. Lena. Mom settled. Had to call Dr. Patel for emergency sedative. She kept trying to leave, saying she had to teach her 3rd period class. This is getting worse. Maya typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on, I know. I'm working on it. Which was either the truth or a lie, depending on what she decided to do. At 4:47 p.m., she arrived at the Cardinal. Derek was already there, looking stressed. Hey, he said. About last night. That was really impressive, but also, maybe let's avoid confrontations with customers, even when they're being dicks. Understood. You're on section 3. Should be steady, but not crazy. It was steady, but not crazy. Maya served salads and steaks and smiled at people who didn't look at her face. She calculated bills in her head and brought them in leather presenters and said thank you when people left 15% tips. At 9:33 p.m., a family of 4 asked her to split their check 4 ways, even though they'd shared multiple dishes. It took her 4 minutes to calculate each person's exact portion, accounting for shared items and individual drinks and the one person who'd ordered gluten-free pasta that cost $3 more. That's amazing, the mother said when Maya delivered all 4 checks. How did you do that so fast? Practice, Maya said, which was both true and the saddest possible answer. Her shift ended at midnight. She'd made $167 in tips, which was better than expected. She deposited it all via mobile app before she could think about spending it. At 12:47 a.m., sitting in her car in the Cardinal's parking lot, Maya called Catherine Chen. It rang twice before Catherine answered, sounding alert despite the hour. Maya? If I take the job, Maya said, when would I start? Next Monday if you want. I'd need to run background checks and process paperwork, but we can expedite. And the thing about finishing my degree, that's real, not just something you're saying. It's in writing. I'll send you the offer letter tonight if you want. Full details, everything spelled out. Maya took a breath. I have conditions. Name them. I need a signing bonus. $10,000 paid up front. I need 2 weeks of flexible scheduling at the start so I can help my family transition some care situations, and I need confirmation in writing that Morrison is actually willing to work with me again. Done, and I'll have Morrison copy you on an email by tomorrow afternoon. Anything else? Why are you doing this? Catherine was quiet for a moment. Honestly, because Richard Patterson, the billionaire from last night, he's a client. He's also an asshole who inherited his money and thinks that makes him special. And watching you quietly demolish him while he tried to humiliate you was the most satisfying thing I've seen in months. I want you on my team because people who can do what you did, stay calm, stay smart, stay human in the face of cruelty, those people are rare, and they're exactly who I want working for me. Maya closed her eyes. Send me the offer letter. You'll have it in an hour. Maya hung up and sat in the darkness of the parking lot, listening to her heart beat too fast. She'd just agreed to something that would change everything. She'd just made a decision based on incomplete information, which violated every instinct she had. But the math finally worked. For the first time in 8 months, when she calculated the future, the answer came up positive. The offer letter arrived at 1:43 a.m., and Maya read it 3 times before allowing herself to believe it was real. Catherine's signature at the bottom, witnessed and dated. Salary, $85,000 annually. Signing bonus, $10,000, to be paid within 5 business days of acceptance. Start date, Monday, September 2nd. Provisions for thesis completion, flexible scheduling during onboarding, comprehensive health insurance that, Maya noticed with something catching in her throat, included coverage for neurological care and long-term memory support. She signed it electronically at 2:16 a.m. and sent it back. Then she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling of her studio apartment, listening to her neighbor's bass-heavy music thump through the thin walls, and tried to remember the last time she'd felt hope that wasn't immediately followed by calculation of its probable failure. Sleep came eventually, shallow and restless, and her alarm at 5:17 felt like it had sounded only minutes after she'd closed her eyes. The morning shift at Grounds and Petals was brutal. She moved through it mechanically, her body present while her mind spun through scenarios, telling Derek she was leaving the Cardinal, telling Jessie she'd be gone from the coffee shop, calling memory care facilities to ask about availability and cost, explaining to Lena that things were about to change in ways that might actually be good. At 11:05 a.m., her phone buzzed with an email from Professor Morrison. Maya, Catherine Chen reached out to me yesterday. I'm delighted to hear you might be returning to your research. Your thesis work was exceptional, and I'd be more than happy to support your completion of the degree remotely. When you're ready to discuss next steps, please call. I'm glad you're doing well. Alan Maya read it in the back room of the coffee shop, leaning against a rack of coffee beans, and felt something break loose in her chest. Something that might have been relief or grief or the complicated space between them. She called Lena during her lunch break. I got a job, Maya said without preamble. A real job. It starts Monday. Silence on the other end, then, what kind of job? Quantitative analysis at a hedge fund in Charlotte. It's what I was studying for at MIT. Wait, what? How did this... Maya explained about Catherine Chen, about the confrontation at the Cardinal, about the offer that had appeared like some kind of mathematical miracle when the equations had looked unsolvable. That's... Lena's voice was strange, tight. That's amazing. God, Maya, that's really amazing. There's a signing bonus, 10,000. I want to use it for Mom, to get her into somewhere good, somewhere safe. Okay. Lena's voice cracked slightly. Okay. Yeah. We should do that. We should definitely do that. They spent the next hour on the phone, looking up facilities, comparing costs and reviews and waitlists. There was a place in Chapel Hill, Heritage Gardens, that specialized in early-stage Alzheimer's, that had a 2-week availability for a private room that cost $200 a month, but included everything: meals, medication management, 24-hour care, memory therapy programs. "I can cover the first 3 months with the bonus," Maya said, running numbers in her head. "After that, between my salary and your income, we can split it. It'll be tight, but it'll work." "You sure? What about finishing school?" "I can do both. I have to do both." They scheduled a tour for that afternoon. Maya called Derek and told him she was sick, which wasn't entirely a lie. Her stomach was churning with an anxiety that felt remarkably like illness. Then she picked up Lena and drove to Chapel Hill, where Heritage Gardens occupied a converted estate on 3 landscaped acres, all brick walkways and garden spaces and windows that looked out over North Carolina pine forests. The director, a soft-spoken woman named Patricia, who wore her gray hair in a practical braid, showed them through the facilities. Private rooms with private bathrooms, communal dining spaces, a library, a music room. Residents moved through the halls with varying degrees of independence, some walking freely, others with staff assistance, all treated with a dignity that made Maya's chest ache. "We focus on maintaining quality of life for as long as possible," Patricia explained. "Memory therapy, music therapy, structured activities. Your mother would have a care plan tailored to her specific needs and adjusted as those needs change." "When could she start?" Lena asked. "We have a room available beginning next week. I'd want to do an assessment first. Have her visit, spend a few hours here, let us evaluate her needs. Then if everyone agrees it's a good fit, we could move forward with admission." They scheduled the assessment for Thursday. Maya wrote a deposit check for $2, half of what she had in savings, that would hold the room while they finalized paperwork. In the car on the way back to Durham, Lena said quietly, "This doesn't feel real." "I know. A week ago we were talking about what would happen if she wandered into traffic. Now we're putting down a deposit at a place with therapy gardens." "Math," Maya said. "The right variables finally aligned." Lena laughed, but it sounded wet. "You always did love your variables," Maya told Derek that night during a rare lull in service at the Cardinal. "I'm giving 2 weeks' notice," she said. "I got another job. Better opportunity." Derek looked genuinely surprised, then disappointed. "Damn, you're one of my best. Can I ask where you're going?" "Charlotte. Finance work. Like banking?" "Something like that." He sighed. "Well, congratulations. You want to work the next 2 weeks? Or should I just take you off the schedule now?" "I'll work through the end of August. Then I'm done." She gave Jessie notice at the coffee shop the next morning. Jessie hugged her, smelling like vanilla syrup and espresso, and said she was happy for her but also really sad, because who was going to cover the opening shifts now, and also who was going to help her understand the difference between macchiatos and cortados, because Maya was the only one who could explain it in a way that made sense. "You'll figure it out," Maya said. "You're smarter than you think." The assessment at Heritage Gardens happened on a Thursday afternoon that felt like stepping into an alternate timeline where good things were allowed to happen. Their mother was having a clear day, not perfect, but clear enough to understand where they were and why, clear enough to walk through the facility with Patricia and comment that it was very nice, and much nicer than the house. She didn't remember living in a house. She'd been in a small apartment near Lena's for the past 2 years, but she seemed calm, even pleased, when Patricia showed her the room that would be hers. She sat in the chair by the window and looked out at the gardens and said, "I could read here. I used to like reading." Maya and Lena exchanged glances. Their mother hadn't read a full book in over a year. "You could," Patricia agreed gently. "We have a library, lots of books." The move-in date was set for Sunday, September 1st. Maya would start her new job the next day. It was happening too fast, all of it, but momentum had its own mathematics, and Maya had learned long ago that when the variables aligned in your favor, you didn't question it, you just moved forward before they could shift again. Saturday night, her last shift at the Cardinal, the restaurant was busy enough that she didn't have time to feel sentimental about leaving. She moved through her section with practiced efficiency, delivering food and refilling drinks and calculating bills that she'd never have to calculate again after tonight. At 9:47 p.m., a couple at table 8 asked her what she'd recommend for dessert. "The chocolate terrine," Maya said automatically. "It's excellent." "You seem very sure," the woman said, smiling. "Math," Maya replied. "I've observed its success rate over 7 months. Statistical probability suggests you'll enjoy it." They laughed, thinking it was a joke. Derek gave her a card signed by the kitchen staff and a bottle of wine that probably cost $40. "You're going to do great things," he said, and he sounded like he meant it. She drove home at 12:53 a.m. for the last time with the Cardinal's tips in her wallet, $183, which would go toward gas and groceries and the diminishing category of expenses she could almost, finally, afford to not count so carefully. Sunday was consumed with moving her mother into Heritage Gardens. They brought clothes and photographs, her mother's favorite blanket, a music box that had belonged to Maya's grandmother. Her mother wandered through the process with vague pleasantness, asking twice who Patricia was and once whether they were going on vacation. "You're staying here for a while." "Mom," Lena explained for the 3rd time, "Maya and I will visit all the time. It's just a different place to live." "Oh," their mother said, "that's nice." She didn't cry when they left. She was already looking at a photo book that a staff member had brought her. Something to keep her occupied, to keep her from the moment of separation that she might or might not understand was happening. Maya cried in the parking lot, while Lena drove because Maya's hands were shaking too badly to hold the wheel. "She'll be okay," Lena said, but her own voice was unsteady. "I know, and you're going to be okay too. New job, finishing school, all of it." "I know. So why does it feel like everything's ending?" Maya didn't have an answer for that. The math said things were getting better. The math said she'd made the right decisions, taken the right opportunities, that the variables had aligned in improbable but quantifiable ways. But some things couldn't be calculated, like the specific weight of watching your mother forget who you were in real time, or the particular ache of knowing that success meant leaving behind the life you'd built in failure's shadow. Monday morning arrived with the inevitability of differential equations. Maya put on clothes she'd bought specifically for this, a charcoal suit from Target that was professional enough without being expensive, low heels that she could walk in, minimal jewelry. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror and saw someone unfamiliar, put together, professional, like the person she'd been supposed to become 3 years ago before everything had derailed. The drive to Charlotte took 43 minutes. Chen and Associates occupied the 15th floor of a glass and steel tower in the financial district, with views that looked out over the city's skyline. The lobby was minimalist and expensive, marble floors, modern art that probably cost more than Maya's car, a receptionist who smiled professionally and directed her to the elevators. Catherine was waiting when Maya stepped off on 15. "Welcome," she said, shaking Maya's hand with a firm, warm grip. "Ready to start?" "I think so." "Good, because we've got a lot to cover." The orientation was thorough and overwhelming. Building security, IT systems, compliance training, introductions to a team of 12 analysts, who all had degrees from places like Princeton and Stanford and Caltech, and who all looked at Maya with polite assessment that she recognized as the social mathematics of establishing hierarchy. Her desk was in an open-plan office space, positioned between a man named David, who had a PhD in applied mathematics from Carnegie Mellon, and a woman named Sarah, who'd worked at Goldman Sachs for 5 years before joining Chen and Associates. They were both friendly in the efficient way of people who were busy and competent and didn't have time for excessive pleasantries. Catherine gave her the first week's assignment. Analyze 3 years of high-frequency trading data for a specific set of tech stocks, identify patterns, build a predictive model, present findings on Friday. This is typically a 2-week project, Catherine said. But I want to see how you work under pressure. Take the full 2 weeks if you need it, or impress me. Maya took it home that night, all 17 gigabytes of data, and didn't sleep. She built a Python script to pass the information, ran statistical analyses, identified 13 distinct patterns in after-hours trading that correlated with earnings announcements, tested her model against historical data, and refined the algorithm until it achieved 73% accuracy in predicting short-term price movements. She presented on Wednesday. The conference room went silent when she finished. Catherine sat back in her chair, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "How confident are you in this model?" Catherine asked. 73% confident, Maya said, which is 13% higher than the baseline random walk hypothesis would predict, accounting for market volatility and... "I'm not asking for the statistics," Catherine interrupted gently. "I'm asking what you think." Maya paused. "I think it works. I think it could work better with more data and more time, but as it stands now, it's viable." Catherine smiled. "David, how long did this same project take you?" David, sitting 3 seats down, grimaced. 12 days. "And what was your accuracy rate?" 68%. Catherine looked back at Maya. "You just did in 3 days what typically takes our analysts 2 weeks, and you did it better. That's either beginner's luck or exactly what I was hoping for when I hired you." "It's not luck," Maya said quietly. "It's just math." "No," Catherine corrected, "it's talent. Math is what everyone in this room can do. What you just demonstrated is understanding what the math means and how to apply it. That's different." The meeting ended, and colleagues who'd been politely distant were suddenly interested, suddenly asking questions about her methodology, her coding approach, her background. Maya answered carefully, aware that she was being evaluated on dimensions beyond just technical competence. That night, driving back to Durham, she called Lena. "How's Mum?" she asked. "She's good. I visited during lunch. She was in music therapy. They were playing stuff from the 70s and she knew all the words." "It was." Lena's voice caught. "It was really nice, actually. How's the new job?" "Terrifying," Maya admitted. "Also, maybe the right thing. I can't tell yet. You'll figure it out. You always do." But that was the thing about variables, Maya thought as she ended the call. You could calculate probable outcomes, you could run the numbers, you could build models that predicted the future with 73% accuracy. But that other 27%, the space where talent met luck, where opportunity met timing, where a billionaire's cruelty became the catalyst for transformation, that was still uncertain. And uncertainty, Maya was learning, was just another form of mathematics. One she was finally ready to solve. 3 months into her job at Chen and Associates, Maya had developed a rhythm that felt sustainable in ways her previous life never had. She woke at 6:30, arrived at the Charlotte office by 8:00, worked through complex financial models until 6:00 or 7:00, drove back to Durham and visited her mother twice a week at Heritage Gardens. On weekends, she worked on her thesis, rebuilding her research, incorporating the real-world financial data she now had access to, corresponding with Professor Morrison via video calls that felt like threading a needle between who she'd been and who she was becoming. The signing bonus had covered her mother's first 3 months of care. Her salary covered the ongoing costs with enough left over that she'd started a savings account that currently held $4. 300. More money than she'd had at one time since before her father's death 3 years ago. The numbers finally worked. The equation finally balanced. But equations, Maya was learning, were only as stable as their underlying assumptions. It was a Thursday in late November when Catherine called her into a private conference room. Catherine looked tired in a way Maya hadn't seen before, the kind of exhaustion that came from too many decisions made under too much pressure. "Close the door," Catherine said. Maya did, feeling her stomach tighten with the pre-calculation anxiety that preceded bad news. "I'm going to be direct," Catherine began. "Richard Patterson, the client from that night at the Cardinal, he's been asking questions about you." Maya's first thought was litigation. Her second was that somehow her confrontation with him had professional consequences she hadn't anticipated. Her third was more complex, more troubling. "What kind of questions?" "Background, education, how you came to work here. He knows I hired you essentially because of what happened that night, and he's—" Catherine paused, choosing words carefully. "He's threatened to pull his portfolio from the fund if I don't fire you." The words landed with mathematical precision. Direct, unambiguous, zero room for interpretation. "He's upset that a waitress showed him up," Maya said flatly. "He's a narcissist with too much money and too little self-awareness," Catherine corrected. "But he's also our third largest client. His portfolio represents approximately 18% of our assets under management. Losing him would be significant." Maya did the math automatically. 18% of a fund managing approximately $340 million meant Patterson controlled about $61 million. The management fees on that, even at the industry standard 2%, represented over $1 million annually to Chen and Associates. "You're telling me this because you want me to understand why you're about to fire me," Maya said. "I'm telling you this," Catherine said carefully, "because I want you to understand the situation fully before we decide what to do about it. Catherine leaned forward. "Here's what I told Richard Patterson when he made his demands, that you're the most talented analyst I've hired in 5 years, that the models you've built have already generated returns that exceed what his portfolio could manage elsewhere. That firing you would be a disservice to every other client who benefits from your work." She paused. "He didn't care. He wants you gone because you made him look foolish in front of his friends. That's the level of maturity we're dealing with." "So what are you asking me?" "I'm asking if you're willing to have a conversation with him, face to face. Let him say whatever he needs to say. Let him feel heard, maybe diffuse this before it becomes a bigger problem." Maya felt something cold settle in her chest, a familiar recognition of power dynamics dressed up as reasonable compromise. "You want me to apologize? I want you to let him save face. There's a difference. Not to me." Catherine sighed. "I know, and I wouldn't ask if there was another option. But the reality is that this industry runs on relationships and reputation, and Patterson has both. He makes one phone call to the right people, he can make it very difficult for you to work anywhere else in quantitative finance. So I should be grateful he's only threatening to get me fired from one job instead of blacklisting me entirely." "I'm not saying it's fair," Catherine said quietly. "I'm saying it's real, and I'm asking what you want to do about it, knowing all the variables." Maya sat in silence, running calculations that had nothing to do with numbers. She thought about her mother at Heritage Gardens, about the care that cost $4, $200 a month that she could finally afford. She thought about her thesis, about Professor Morrison's patient emails, helping her rebuild her research. She thought about Lena, who'd been able to cut back to one job because Maya's income had stabilized their mother's situation. She thought about the mathematical certainty that swallowing her pride would solve more problems than defending it. "When does he want this conversation?" Maya asked. Tomorrow. Lunch. Somewhere public. He suggested the same restaurant where you worked. The Cardinal. I think he finds that symbolically satisfying. Of course he does. Maya stood. Tell him I'll be there. Maya. It's fine. It's just math. I know how to calculate acceptable losses. She left before Catherine could respond, returned to her desk, and stared at her computer screen without seeing it. David, in the desk beside her, glanced over. You okay? He asked. Fine, Maya lied, just thinking through a problem. But the problem wasn't something she could solve with Python scripts or statistical models. The problem was that she'd been naive enough to think that being right mattered more than preserving the egos of men who were merely rich. That night, she drove to Heritage Gardens and sat with her mother in the sunroom, where residents gathered after dinner to watch television or play cards or simply exist in communal quiet. Her mother was having a vague day, present but distant, recognizing Maya but uncertain about context. Hi, baby, she said when Maya sat down. Did you have school today? Something like that. You work so hard. You've always worked so hard. Her mother's hand found Maya's, squeezed with surprising strength. I'm proud of you. Did I ever tell you that? Yeah, Mom, you did. Good. That's important. Mothers should tell their daughters when they're proud. They sat together until visiting hours ended, and Maya drove back to her apartment, feeling the specific loneliness of watching someone slowly disappear while their body remained. Friday arrived with unseasonable warmth for late November, the kind of weather that felt like a mistake in the calendar. Maya dressed carefully, the same charcoal suit she'd worn her first day at Chen & Associates. Low heels, minimal jewelry, armor disguised as professionalism. She arrived at the Cardinal at noon. Richard Patterson was already seated. Same table, table 12, same expensive suit, same watch that cost more than most people earned in a year. He stood when she approached. Ms. Rivera, thank you for coming. Mr. Patterson. She sat down without waiting for him to offer. A server she didn't recognize, they'd hired someone new after she left, brought water and menus. Richard waved them away. We don't need menus. Just bring us the lunch special, both of us. The server nodded and disappeared. Maya waited. I wanted to speak with you, Richard began, because I think we got off on the wrong foot. Did we? What happened that night? I was having fun with my colleagues. Maybe I went too far, but you have to understand, it wasn't personal. Maya said nothing. Catherine tells me you're very good at your job, he continued, that you're an asset to the firm. And I want you to know that I have no issue with your competence. My concern is about professionalism, about understanding appropriate boundaries in service-oriented industries. You wanted me to apologize for being right, Maya said evenly. Richard's smile thinned. I wanted you to show some humility. There's a difference between being correct and being respectful. You asked me to prove I could do basic math as a condition of receiving a tip. You implied I was incompetent and stupid. And when I demonstrated otherwise, you left without paying what you promised. She kept her voice calm, conversational. So let's not pretend this is about respect. You embarrassed me. You embarrassed yourself. The server arrived with 2 plates, salmon with roasted vegetables, the daily special. Neither of them moved to eat. Richard leaned back in his chair. Catherine also tells me you have a family situation, sick mother, I believe, expensive care. That must be stressful. The threat wasn't even subtle. Maya felt her jaw tighten. Here's what I'm proposing, Richard continued. You acknowledge that you could have handled that evening with more tact, publicly, professionally, maybe in an email that Catherine can share with relevant parties. In return, I continue my business relationship with Chen & Associates, and you keep your job. Everyone wins. Except my dignity. Dignity doesn't pay for memory care, Richard said flatly. I'm offering you a practical solution to a practical problem. Take it." Maya looked at him, really looked at him. Saw the confidence of someone who'd never had to question whether the world would accommodate his needs, who'd learned that money could reshape reality to his preferences, who genuinely believed that his comfort mattered more than someone else's truth. She thought about the equation of her life, her mother's care, her thesis, her savings account, her sister's reduced stress, her own fragile stability. She thought about acceptable losses. "No," Maya said. Richard blinked. "Excuse me?" "No, I won't apologize. I won't write an email. I won't acknowledge that I did anything wrong because I didn't." She stood. "You wanted to humiliate someone you thought was beneath you. It didn't work. And now you're trying to punish me for the crime of being competent while poor. But I'm not sorry, and I won't pretend to be." "Then you're fired," Richard said. "Catherine won't have a choice." "Maybe. Probably." Maya felt surprisingly calm. "But you'll still be the man who got shown up by a waitress and was so fragile about it that you had to destroy her career. That's what people will remember. That's what Catherine will remember when she's deciding which clients she wants to keep and which ones aren't worth the trouble." She walked out before he could respond, left the restaurant where she'd spent 7 months calculating bills for people who didn't see her as human, got in her car, and drove back to Charlotte. Catherine was waiting in her office when Maya arrived. "He called," Catherine said without preamble. "He's pulling his portfolio." "I know, I'm sorry." "Are you?" Maya paused. "I'm sorry you're losing a client. I'm not sorry about what I said." Catherine stood, walked to the window that overlooked Charlotte's skyline. 18% of assets under management. Losing that will hurt. It'll mean layoffs, probably. Smaller bonuses. Might mean we have to scale back some of our research initiatives. I understand if you need to... But, Catherine interrupted, turning back to face Maya. It also means I won't be beholden to a narcissistic child who thinks his money gives him the right to abuse people, which frankly I should have cut loose years ago. Maya stared at her. "You're not fired," Catherine said. "You're getting a raise, 10%, effective immediately. Because what you just did, standing up for yourself even when it cost you something, that's exactly the kind of integrity I want in my analysts. Money I can replace. People with actual backbone? That's harder to find. But the fund will survive. We'll bring in new clients. We'll adjust. That's what we do." Catherine smiled, small and genuine. "Besides, your models have generated enough return in 3 months to offset some of the loss. And once word gets out that we're the fund that fired a client for being an asshole to our staff, that's not bad publicity in certain circles." Maya sat down heavily in the chair across from Catherine's desk. "I thought I was about to lose everything again. You calculated the risks, made a decision based on your values, and accepted the potential consequences. That's not losing. That's choosing." "It didn't feel like choosing. It felt like the only option that wouldn't destroy me." "Then you chose correctly." Catherine returned to her desk. "Now get back to work. We have a fund to run and a thesis for you to finish. Morrison sent me an email. By the way, said you're on track to defend in March. That's faster than he expected." "I've had time to focus," Maya said, "and better data. Keep it up. I want doctor in front of your name on your business cards by summer." Maya returned to her desk, where David immediately swiveled his chair toward her. "So?" he asked. "Still employed?" "Still employed. And Patterson? Gone." David let out a low whistle. Catherine actually did it. Respect. He paused. "Also, several of us were prepared to walk if she'd fired you. Just so you know." "Really?" "You're good at what you do, and you're decent, which is a rare combination in this industry. We wanted you to know you weren't alone." It was perhaps the kindest thing anyone had said to Maya in months. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and turned back to her computer, where a half-finished algorithm waited for her attention. The next 2 months passed in concentrated focus. She worked, she visited her mother, she refined her thesis. Professor Morrison's feedback was detailed and encouraging. Her integration of real-world trading data had strengthened her research significantly, had transformed it from theoretical framework to practical application. "This is publishable work," Morrison told her during a video call in late January. "Once you defend, I'd encourage you to submit to journals. This could make a real impact in the field." Her mother's condition had stabilized in the way that degenerative diseases sometimes did, a plateau before the next decline, but a plateau nonetheless. She still recognized Maya and Lena most days, still engaged with the activities at Heritage Gardens, still had moments of lucidity that felt like gifts. On a Saturday in early February, Maya brought her thesis draft to show her mother, all 187 pages of mathematical modeling and financial analysis and careful research. Her mother held it like it was precious, ran her fingers over the title page. Neural Network Applications in High-Frequency Trading Pattern Recognition by Maya Concepcion Rivera. "You wrote this?" her mother asked. "I did. It's so long. You must be very smart." "You taught me," Maya said gently. "You taught me how to think about math, remember?" Her mother looked at her, and for a moment, something sharp and clear flickered in her eyes. "I remember you at the kitchen table, little thing with enormous eyes asking me about calculus. You were 12. 11, Maya corrected, her throat tight. 11, her mother agreed, and so bright. I knew you'd do important things." She handed the thesis back. "Is this an important thing?" "I think so. I hope so." "Then I'm proud of you." Simple, direct, before the clarity faded again and she was asking if it was time for dinner. Maya defended her thesis on March 15th via video conference with her committee at MIT. The defense lasted 2 hours, presentation, questions, challenges to her methodology, and conclusions. She answered everything with the calm precision she'd learned from explaining bills to difficult customers, from building financial models under deadline pressure, from choosing dignity over expedience. The committee deliberated for 17 minutes before Morrison returned to the screen, smiling. "Congratulations, Dr. Rivera," he said. "Your thesis is approved with distinction." She called Lena first, who screamed loud enough that Maya had to hold the phone away from her ear. She called Catherine second, who said, "I told you so," with obvious satisfaction. She drove to Heritage Gardens third to tell her mother, who didn't fully understand, but recognized that Maya was happy and said that was all that mattered. That night, alone in her apartment, Maya updated her resume. Maya Concepcion Rivera, Ph.D., Quantitative Analyst, Chen and Associates. B. The path from MIT student to dropout to waitress to analyst to doctor had been neither linear nor predictable. The variables had shifted in ways she couldn't have calculated, had aligned through a combination of talent and luck and the specific cruelty of a billionaire who'd underestimated her. She thought about that night at table 12. About Richard Patterson demanding she prove herself while never imagining she actually could. She thought about Catherine seeing potential where others saw service labor. She thought about her mother forgetting her face but remembering her brightness. She thought about all the calculations she'd made, the acceptable losses and impossible choices and desperate mathematics of survival, and how sometimes the most important equation wasn't about finding the right answer, but about deciding which variables actually mattered. 6 months later, Maya published her first paper in the Journal of Financial Economics. A year after that, she was promoted to senior analyst. 2 years after that, when Catherine decided to semi-retire, Maya became a partner. Her mother declined gradually, then rapidly, then was gone on a Tuesday morning in October, while Maya was driving to Charlotte and couldn't get there in time to say goodbye. At the funeral, Lena asked if she regretted it. all the choices that had led them here, all the sacrifices that had made the last good years possible. Maya thought about dignity and pride and the specific mathematics of choosing yourself even when the cost seems unbearable. "No," she said, "I don't regret it. Because some equations balanced in ways you couldn't predict. Some variables mattered more than survival. And sometimes the most important calculation wasn't about the numbers at all. It was about knowing what you were worth and refusing to accept less, even when accepting less would have been so much easier, even when the math said you should, especially then."